Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Scottish Property Podcast. My name is Stephen Clark and I'm joined as always with the Nick Ponte.
Oh, what a build-up, mate. I must be getting to that status. Just because we've sold out the Glasgow event, I think that must be it. Everybody's just
Mate, I'm getting messages constantly going, can you get me into the Glasgow Scottish Property Podcast Network event? I goes, I can't, it's sold out.
Because they want their T-shirt signed by me. Or their book. We need to get a book out.
So this week we have got a phenomenal guest in the podcast. That's someone that was probably one of the first people in property that I actually followed and got quite inspired by building a property kind of social media brand, a personal brand on, and it is Nicole Bremner. Now, Nicole's done phenomenal developments in London, you know, with you know, a GDV of up to 120 million that she shares in details on this, and it didn't go plain sailing, and she's so open and honest, and she shares that story incredibly well and honest about the fact that it didn't go quite to plan, and they've went against quite a lot of road bumps in the road in her journey, isn't she?
What a story. I mean, over the last 10 years, what she's done, what she's achieved, and, you know, she's a real kind of go-getter. You can tell that, you know, she's got a lot of creativity, drive and stuff like that. Compare a little bit to yourself, Stephen.
she's me times 100. She's one of the people that I followed on Instagram back in 2016 when I first started Instagram, and I think at the time, you know, Maya was just born, and I kind of found her very inspiring. You know, this powerful, dominating woman who was fucking killing business, killing property development in London, only doing it a few years, but she was taking this to the next level. So, you know, you followed that personal brand as she built it, and I've kind of followed her story for a few years, and she shares it, and she shares it open and honestly, and she does go into the negative sides, the people that people won't promote on social media, the stuff that people won't put out there. She does go into detail, and it was really good. I'm kind of thankful for her for being open and honest for that.
Yeah, that's what I found dead refreshing as well, was the honesty. So I think you'll really enjoy this interview, guys. And here's Nicole Bremner.
So welcome, Nicole Bremner, to the Scottish Property Podcast. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Stephen and Nick.
Now, we're just kind of chatting off air on this. You are probably one of the people back in probably 2016, 2017 that myself and Nick first started on Instagram, followed you, saw what you were doing. I mean, I just had my daughter, so I really looked at inspiring women who were doing really cool things and thought, wow. And in that time, you were doing phenomenal stuff. So we're so happy to have you on the podcast to kind of share that story and talk more about you. So thanks again.
Instagram royalty we've got here.
We do. Check out Nicole on Instagram, guys.
See, I feel like I'm talking to royalty because I'm sure that the Scotsmen are always portrayed as royalty on various dramas, and it's also been voted the sexiest accent in the UK. So here I am.
Come on.
I don't know about that. We might have the accent, but we've not got the looks. I mean, looking at the two of us here, so.
Oh dear, no, sounds very good.
So I'm kind of cautious that probably quite a bit of the Scottish audience might not know you. So would you be able to take us back to the kind of backstory and what you did before you got into property, and how you found yourself involved in property?
Well, I'll take you right back, so I'm getting on in years now, but I was born in Australia, and I lived there until I was 21 and could not wait to leave and head over to Europe, where everything was bigger, better and shinier. The roads were paved in gold, all of that. So left Australia at 21. So I've now been out of Australia longer than I was in it, which is a very strange concept. Moved to London and worked in banking. I was actually a financial advisor. I had my diploma of financial planning my degree in financial planning in Australia. I came over here. It was worthless in the UK, and the industry was also about 15 years behind. So I worked in banking. That was an easy fit for me, but I was never very good at it. I ended up in all these sort of back office type analytical roles, building spreadsheets, which I enjoyed, but it wasn't me. So that I did that for a little while, and then we moved to the US for a couple of years, and it was just such a phenomenal experience living in New York, and my partner was working on Wall Street, and it was just so exciting. But I started eating all the Ben and Jerry's ice cream as you do. And we're talking about 2007 now. And I started trying all the various Ben and Jerry's, and which I'd never seen before, and getting fatter and fatter. I thought, oh, I really got to lay off this and get into the gym a bit more. And found out I was pregnant.
So it wasn't Ben and Jerry's after all then? No.
I think it was a lot. I should have called him Ben. I played around with that name, but yes, anyway, Ralph is his name. But so yeah, I've had Ralph, my first child in the US, and I went back to work actually when he was 7 months old at Goldman Sachs on Wall Street. And the day I started, my dream job, Lehman Brothers collapsed. And that was the start of the world financial crisis. And so that again was really interesting. I sat in a room with desks everywhere of just people glued to the TV screens as the finance industry collapsed around us and everyone's screens were just red. It was really fascinating.
That must have been like, looking back on that now, I mean, obviously you didn't realize at the time how significant and how much of a huge thing that was. But like, you know, now we talk about that a huge moment in history because we all know what happened then after everything started collapsing in this country as well. But like, I was actually watching footage the other day on YouTube, and it was like people just carrying out like cardboard boxes of stuff at the offices, like when the whole thing crashed. So like that must have been surreal, that moment.
It really was surreal. And it's interesting you say about the cardboard boxes, because that's always going to be my memory of these mainly men, because that's who worked on Wall Street, white men, mainly white men carrying out their cardboard boxes. And it's kind of like it's one of those momentous occasions that, like you say, Nick, will always reference. It's like lockdown. When was it? Well, between first and second lockdown, you always reference it. And for me, that I think it was the 15th of September 2008. Yes, 2008 will always be a momentous occasion, because it was our momentous occasion. So yeah, that was really interesting. And my partner came home from work that day and just said, we really need to regroup now, because I'm a bit concerned about the labor laws here in the US. If I get made redundant here, they're not very favorable. I'm worried about the whole banking system collapsing. I'm worried we're going to lose everything. And we were on an amazing deal over there, I must say. He was on a 2-year package, and we had everything paid for, our food, our rent, everything for 2 years. So we just finished off that 2 years and just came back to the UK. So that was February 2009 then. And I was very much of the view, right, I was working, I'm not working, what am I going to do? And it was then I started looking at property, because we owned a flat in Clerkenwell, which is in central London. And when we left and we rented that out, and we came back, now the tenants moved, and I just had some guys in just to refresh it a bit. And I think what people forget is, even though we had this huge event of this financial crisis, it actually rebounded really quickly. And it was only about a year later that we sold that property, and it had over doubled from around 2004 to 2010. And it was really interesting to see just how quickly the market had rebounded, or at least come back to its earlier levels, its prior 2008 levels in some areas. It didn't in others, I will add, but in London. Now, also at this time, it was 2009, as I said, I found this derelict vicarage in Hackney, and it wasn't an area I was ever looking at, but I bought it, and I spent the next 18 months renovating this 4,000 square foot former beautiful vicarage back into what would then become our family home. And also at the same time renovated a flat in Austria as a ski chalet. So I had now 3 projects that I'd done and completed, and I thought, what am I going to do with my life? And I tried so many various things, and all sorts of various things like cooking and crocheting and blogging and knitting and photography and everything. It was the era of the cupcake, you may recall. Everyone was making cupcakes. I thought, yeah, I could do this. I have this amazing kitchen and 7 ovens. I'll be fine. So I tried everything. And it wasn't until my partner just said, look, you've done a great job of these properties. Why don't you look at doing this? I'd never watched Homes Under the Hammer at that stage. I didn't even know that you could borrow money. I didn't watch any TV, actually. I didn't know you could borrow money to do this. I knew you could borrow for buy-to-let because we had to move our flat onto buy-to-let. So yeah, it was just really interesting spending the next couple of months really learning everything I could about this whole industry and what it meant. Sorry, just checking if that's me that's beeping. I don't think it is. Or maybe it's just in my ears. Anyway.
At this point, were you determined not to go back into investment banking then, to try and find something new, to find something that you can, become passionate about and go into?
Yeah, it's a good point. And I guess for me, I always felt like a part-timer in banking because when I'd had my children, I was determined to be a certain type of mother. Also, when I moved back in February 2009, I found out I was pregnant again with our second child, who I then went and had in August.
Had you moved on to a different type of ice cream by this time? No Ben and Jerry's.
I discovered Haagen-Dazs.
Going up in the world.
Yeah, you can't beat vanilla Haagen-Dazs. It's just the best. Anyway, I'm a bit of an ice cream connoisseur. Yeah, so that's when I really threw myself into learning everything I could about property. I wanted to be a hands-on mother, but I couldn't while ever I was working for someone. So yeah, that was just a really interesting time learning about property. And I bought another derelict property in Hackney, renovated it, sold it, loved it, made more money than I'd ever made in my life before. And that's saying something. I was at Goldman. So then I did another one and another one and another one. And that's when I thought, this is fantastic. But it did get to a point in around 2015 where unrenovated properties were selling for more than renovated properties because everyone started wanting to do it. And I found that everyone was just jumping on this bandwagon. So yeah, it was interesting, but that's sort of the very early stages of my property career, shall we say.
And this is probably where probably both of us stumbled across you on social media, probably at the 2016 point where you've kind of got this, you've started building this kind of personal brand. And from what I saw at that time, you went on a massive developments in London, like very, very quickly, from kind of throwing yourself into this property developer in London to the scale of the projects you've done were phenomenal. How could you talk us around the time of that and how it all came about?
Yeah, how it initially came about was in 2014. I tried to buy a property. All of a sudden, I discovered JVs. I think is probably going right back to the beginning. I discovered that previously I'd bought, renovated, sold, waited for the money to come in and do it all over again. And I realized that was quite a long-term process. But if I could JV with people, I could have the equity continuing. So I could continuing to come in, so I could have this whole pipeline and build out. And I thought, this is fantastic. Rather than doing 1 a year, I can do 2 a year, or even 3 a year, or 4 a year, or 9. So that was an epiphany, and it was brilliant. But also in hindsight, it was probably running before I could walk and just going far too fast. So how it started is 2014, tried to buy this property, wasn't able to because my original equity partner pulled out. So then I looked to try and replace that equity partner, and my architect actually introduced me to who then went on to be my business partner, Avi. So he was a lot more experienced than I was, and he just introduced me to much bigger developments than I'd ever imagined. He was doing house to flat renovations, whereas I hadn't done one. I sort of did one at the same time as we did another property. And then also buying commercial units and converting those into residential. And that's really how it worked. And as I started doing well, I'd put that out on Instagram, and people would see it and want to be part of it and say, how can we invest with you? And that's when I worked out that there was crowdfunding. And this again was probably, we're moving on to 2015, 16 now, is when I was introduced to simple crowdfunding. And they just said, yeah, sure, we can put the whole FCA, the Financial Conduct Association wrapper around this. So you can do it in a very compliant way, because I was concerned if something went wrong and I didn't have that compliancy around me, then I was liable, and still I am liable if things go wrong. And so for me, that was very important.
You would just package this up and put this onto the, like, simply crowdfunding platform, and investors would just go and invest, you know, a small amount to a large amount, basically whatever they had.
Yeah, anywhere from 500 to the largest investor was over $1 million through the platform. So it really was.
What kind easy. Of like figures? Because this is where it gets like, some people just like won't relate to this, because we're talking about London here, right? I'm sitting in Glasgow, Stephen's sitting in Fife. It's very rare that you see a property come on the market which is over £1 million. So let's just put things in perspective here. What type of deals are we talking about here in terms of, like, you know, GDV sort of value of some of your commercial to residential projects?
Yeah, quite large. So we had, at one point, we had a property that we crowdfunded that the GDV was, at one point, before the market then corrected again, was over 5 million, and we raised 750,000 from the crowd. We had another one where the GDV was 8 million, sorry, and we raised 2 million. Another one where the GDV was 2.6 and we raised 650. So all in, we raised 6.43 million from the crowd. Plus we had some other larger
equity share that you raised on the crowd, and then you borrowed
all equity.
Right.
Yeah, all equity. And then we would put the debt on top of that. So we had at one point, so I'd say the peak portfolio was in 2017 when we purchased the last of the properties that I purchased. And at that point in time, the properties together, of which I owned a small share of, were worth over 120 million. Wow. And that's where people often have printed, yeah, Nicole's worth 120 million. No, I was never.
That's our headline. That's our headline. We're putting that at the top of the podcast.
Nick, you hate clickbait headlines.
Oh dear. Yeah, well, someone used a bikini picture of me on their podcast. I thought, well, there you go. There's clickbait there. But anyway, you won't be finding any of those.
You haven't turned up in a bikini for us today. We're disappointed.
You're giving Nick ideas now.
It's such clickbait. You look at YouTube, my goodness. Anyway, we're diverging onto a whole other conversation. But it was interesting.
At this point with these developments, was this all with your one business partner? Was it Avi at the time?
Yes, it was. And he would do the development side, I would do the marketing side, and the debt raising side as well. So I'd look after that side of the money. He would deal with the development and the planning, and then I would do the sales. So yeah, it was a really good partnership, I would say, until the market really changed in 2017. And that's when we had this triple whammy of the tax changes, I've forgotten which was, section 43. Yeah, those tax changes. We had the stamp duty increases on second homes, and we had the referendum on the Brexit. And those three things just completely took the wind out of the sails of the London, especially the London luxury property market. And parts of London are only just recovering now from that. So, and even some of them are not recovered yet. So it was a really interesting time, because we found ourselves with 9 projects on the go, 6 of them crowdfunded, nearly 200 individual investors, and planning issues coming out of our ears. Because what had happened is the property market went crazy, and the local authorities, I'm not sure what it's like where you are, but the local authorities could not keep up with this level of demand on them. They didn't have the resources to deal with all these planning applications. So it was a really interesting time. Things just weren't going through. You're having to go through appeal. Things were taking over a year in planning, and they'd go, so what are you going to do about it?
And this whole time you're paying investors plus the debt as well.
Well, we weren't paying investors because they were equity, luckily, but well, luckily for us, not luckily for them, I guess. But we were paying bank, and some of the bank interest charges now, looking back at these projects, are just they've got millions in them. And it was really, really challenging because we'd gone one big change looking back over the property industry with a lot of grey hair now is that the mortgage industry is quite a new one. It's only been around for 40, 50 years, if that. And all the high street banks came into this sort of development finance industry, and they came in with really low interest rates. And then so you could get a development loan for around 3%, which is completely unheard of. And then the high street banks got burned during the 2007, 8, 9 time. They had to call in a lot of loans. They had to put a lot of restrictions on who they could lend to. So it meant that the only people that could get those rates were Barclay Homes and some of the top builders. And it meant that all these second tier lenders sprung up and they started filling that void. There was so much demand from people like me who are now boutique house builders. And they could charge a lot more because we were willing to pay it. So it's not unheard of to have 1% per month. And I'd been used to 3% a month and maybe 3% per annum. And now to go to say 12%. And what would happen is, as there were delays, the banks would add more and more interest onto these. And I really feel now that the industry is really stacked against us boutique developers, which is one reason why I'm no longer doing it, although I'm not sure I'm allowed to say that. You can edit that out if you like, Nick. But the industry is really stacked against us, and it's becoming more and more difficult to make the sort of money that you were able to pre all of this. So yeah, that's just one change. So I found myself sitting on 120 million worth of property that ultimately myself and my business partner were responsible for. All these investors. At the same time, my marriage broke down, and I just thought, oh my goodness, I'm in for a bumpy ride. So since 2017 till now, we had over 110 properties in that portfolio. It's just been selling everything. And luckily we've had Help to Buy, which has propped up the market for a few years. Everything that's Help to Buy now has just sold. And now, even thanks to this boom with these pent up demand from the lockdowns and other various forces on the market, all my luxury things are selling now as well. So it's a really good time just to completely sell down the portfolio, build up that war chest, and then just say, right, what's next?
What's next for Nicole Bremner?
Do you become like so you obviously like became like an accidental landlord then? Did you obviously your primary exit with these 110 properties was to sell them, but because this dip in the market, the luxury end, like you were explaining, you've become a landlord by kind of default, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. And it's really not a role that I do well. I'm not a very tolerant landlord. I have got people who've looked after various things for me. And I think that, you know how some people say, I just can't, I have to do everything myself and I just can't let go. I'm the absolute opposite. I'm happy just to sit there as the conductor and go, you do that, you do that, you do that. Right, let's get on to strategy. And that only works as far as you've got a good team around you. And I've been fortunate to have good teams, but when one person drops the ball, they can really drop the ball, especially around regulatory issues. So yeah, I had to keep really on it. But yeah, I've had a bad experience this year with a tenant who's decided that paying rent's optional, and just again, I sound a bit negative about property, and so just pull me up if I am sounding too negative right now. But it's again, I feel that it's probably stacked against us as landlords as well, because you weren't able to evict anyone during COVID, and yet you had to keep paying your mortgage. You were allowed to have small breaks, but I was too scared because I thought, oh no, I know they're saying it won't impact our credit rating, but what if it does? and that will forever be on our file that we requested a holiday. So yeah, it's a difficult thing. And you know about the Section 8s and Section 21s and going to court and trying to claim back all your money from various tenants. It's a hassle. And I think that we need to be quite realistic when we're talking about property, to say that it's not all building a massive portfolio and having great holidays. It is a lot of work.
And this comes back to the ethos of why we started this podcast in the first place a couple of years ago. We were kind of sick of the bullshit gurus putting it out there that property is easy and you can become financially free in 21 days and you can make all these millions. And it was like, no, the real picture is hard work. It's a lot of risk. It's a lot of graft. We try and do our best, and it's a long-term game. If you wanted to create wealth through property, you have to be in it a long time, as you're demonstrating right now with this kind of fascinating story. So this is interesting, because I think, like, I followed you very, very early on. Well, must have been the 2016, 17, 18 at this point where you kind of got up to right now. And then I probably haven't as much. So this is probably the really interesting bit, because, you know, it's not went swimming. Like, it's not, you've not managed to exit, you know, and make all these millions that you anticipated on doing. You've had to kind of weather a harsh storm.
Yeah.
Where is it at now then? Are they still selling off bit by bit, or are they starting to sell a lot quicker? And where's it standing right now?
Yeah, so it's they're all selling down, and we're at the point now where we're looking at accounts, and we've still got lots of shareholders who are obviously at various states of various levels of understanding, shall we say. So it's messy right now, I'll be honest. It's very, very messy. And this is why, again, I think that this whole using other people's money, and I did have a lot of my own money invested in this, but there was also 6.43 million of investor money, plus some larger investors. So when you're dealing with that number of investors and that amount of money, it is incredibly stressful. It's not as if I can say, oh, well, it's my money, dust myself off and pick up again. This is people's money, and this is their lives, and this is their mental health and their stress. So without going into too much detail about it, it is very much about trying to return shareholder funds first and foremost, as we can when these projects sell down. And we'll pay back the debts to the banks first, which we're doing. It's we've really stabilized these, and thankfully the banks that we're working with are good, and they want everyone to be repaid. And then it's the shareholders. So we're just doing that.
Is it a systematic process, or is it kind of who shouts the loudest? You know, who's, you know, a bank loans up for renewal, that one gets paid back because the interest is going to be, you know, heavier, or is it a strategic approach to who gets paid back first?
Well, it's when they fall due. We're not in any difficulty, that's for sure, as far as banks screaming down our neck. All of the properties, but honestly, I thought maybe at the sort of 2017, 18, I thought this is going to get really, really messy. But thankfully, we're working with a few banks, Oak North, RBS we're still working with, Avamore, and I'm sure there are many others that I've, Shawbrook. Yeah, Shawbrook's been great to me. And we just said, right, things are tough. We've got a renewal coming out. When you do this valuation, it will be downvalued, but what are we going to do about it? We're in this together. And we just, by having those pragmatic conversations and by being ahead of it, not just a lot of people, it's really, really hard to admit that perhaps you failed, or perhaps things aren't as rosy as you had thought they were. And surprisingly, as human beings, we often do that ostrich thing where we just put our head in the sand, hope it will go away. It doesn't. And I think that's probably been my biggest lesson, is that if you can be really upfront and say, right, Stephen, I'm not sure when I'm going to get your money back to you because of X, Y, and Z. However, I believe if we can get to this point A, and then this point B, and then this point C, there's a very good chance that we can get your money. So if you can just hang in there with me, let's get you to that point. And by having those conversations with people, it means that they're a lot more amenable to do that, because they're seeing that you're doing everything within your power to do that. So it's just been a process. The banks are great. We've dealt with the banks, the shareholders on the whole. have been fantastic and patient as well. They've understood there are things that are just completely out of our control. We can't help that we're no longer in Brexit and costs have skyrocketed, and they were already anticipating that was already anticipated and built in. We can't help that the government's levied various taxes on us. So these sorts of things people are understanding. And as far as people who shout the loudest, that doesn't happen because there are laws, thankfully, that protect those who perhaps can't shout as loudly as others or don't have the money to do that. So thankfully, there are company laws that protect all shareholders, and it means that everyone will get their money at the same time. That's just the way that's been. And I should also point out that simple crowdfunding have been fantastic as well, just communicating with the shareholders and working with us to ensure that everyone gets their money back. And I'm confident that not a single shareholder will lose any money out of this. Me, on the other hand, I will. But
when we go into this and we borrow other people's money, I think you touched on that as well. Like, it's always the big risk. If it was your own money, you would just brush yourself off and go, do you know what, didn't go the way I planned it. On to the next one, you know, that's going to reinvent myself, do something different, tweak, change. But with other people's money, you have to stay in this the long game. And I think that shows integrity in who you are as well as a person and a businesswoman. And, you know, that'll be partly towards the personal brand that you've built up over the last years as well, that you can't walk away from this. You're in this for the long haul, to see it right through and see that everyone gets exactly what you've promised through this project, which I think is applaudable.
Well, you have to. I couldn't sleep at night if I couldn't. It's not
God,
me.
I'm
Sorry,
surprised. Nick. I'm surprised you could sleep at all with £6.43 million being lent out. I mean, I have never lent any money from anybody, right? And I think that's probably why I'm still sitting at like 11 buy-to-let properties, and Stephen's got about, I don't know how many he's got. He never reveals it, but I see him buying one every week. So, so Stephen, he's like the kind of like risk taker. He goes out and he does, you know, all these JVs and private investing, funding, and all that. I'm the one that like snail pace, just going along like this. But it's interesting because I listened to another podcast that you were on, and I'm sure the guy who was interviewing you said, you know, if you're getting back into property now, what would you do? And you were like, well, still, you know, you still got a passion for property, you'd still be interested in property, but you would do it all basically with your own cash, and you wouldn't go down the lending route. So that is so interesting from the point of view of somebody who's been there at the highest level of developing and raising those funds to now going back and doing it just for your own cash. And it's just, I find that fascinating. So for the listeners who are listening to this thinking, this is what I need to do to build up the portfolio, I need to raise all this extra funds, maybe there is something just going slow and steady.
I agree. And if I were to do this all over again, I wish that I could do it your way, Nick, and that is slow and steady and just doing my own money.
Nicole,
However,
don't encourage them.
However, I know that if I were to turn back time, I probably wouldn't, because that's my personality. And even every single thing I do, I go into thinking, I want this to be the biggest and the best. So I'm focusing all in on my podcast at the moment. And I just want it to be the biggest and the best podcast ever. And no matter what I do, I just want it to be the biggest and the best. And it's kind of a curse, because I don't know if you're like this, Stephen, but you just think you're constantly strategizing on how you can make this bigger and better. And yet I wish that I had, and I'm working on myself. You know, people are always working on themselves. It's very American to say that. I'm working on myself to get that level of contentment so that I can say, you know what? I'm happy with my the 11 buy-to-let properties I have, and I'm happy with the flexibility and the freedom that gives me in my life. And I'm happy that in a year's time, I'm going to be able to buy one more and add to that. And I'm happy with the structure, and I can sleep at night. And you haven't got any grey hair, and you've probably got a little bit more hair than Stephen. So there you go.
I'm going bald, but yeah, we'll not mention
I'm
it.
grey. I'm really grey. So yeah, that happens.
No, I think that's a good point to take on. And Nick, I knew you were going to bring it up. I knew you were going to talk about it. But yeah, I think that's important to kind of reflect back on this stuff and look back at the lessons learned and the stuff that you would change and you do differently. Is there something you'd do that maybe a bit in betweeny? I wouldn't go hell bent on being massive. I'd scale it back a little bit. Use some money, some invested money. Is there a point where you kind of think, this would have been my this should have been the route?
Yeah, I think that what I did is I placed too much trust in, I placed blind faith actually in my business partner rather than having the checks in place. And I think that it's almost like going into a marriage with a prenup. It's a really awkward thing to do, and it's really horrible to think about. Okay, we're going to go into this marriage, what I'm bringing into mine, what you're bringing into yours, anything. I don't know how they're already been done, I haven't got one, but I've never had one. But what I mean is you go into this relationship planning that if things don't go to plan, at least you've got the fallback. Whereas we all go into business partnerships thinking it's going to be wonderful forever. And I almost think that
These
you
little
need
rose-tinted
to,
glasses.
yeah, exactly. I almost think that you need to go into a relationship with a 2-year break clause and an exit strategy for every 2 years and say, right, we've been in business for 2 years together now. This is the point in time where we give notice, and this is the way that we can exit this. And I do think that this needs to be the way that we approach business. And actually, the lawyer that I've worked with, who Henry Hathaway, lovely Irish guy, he has identified 9 points within the stage of a construction company and development business in which there are potential conflicts. And what he does is he works with clients so that they never get to that point, that the contracts cover every possibility and every friction point along this pathway. And so his clients never ever get to that friction point. So of course it might be, well, I don't need you, look at this, I'm going well. It's like taking medication, and you hear this. I remember watching a close family member on medication for bipolar, and they would be fantastic on their medication and say, look, I'm great, I don't need this medication anymore. They come off it and all of a sudden they crash because they do need it. And it's I think of Henry Hathaway as like this as well, because he's built this process, and if you follow it and if you stick with it, there's no friction. And the moment you think, yeah, I don't need any of this, you come off it, and there are potential friction points. Because look, 50% of relationships end in divorce. So how do we think that our business relationships are going to be any better than that? They're not. We all need an exit strategy from everything that we go into. And it's very unromantic to think about that, but it's just fact.
No, it's a really, really good point, actually. And I do I take a lot of, I relate to a lot of the things you said there and shared, because I kind of made a similar journey myself. So yeah, I think you're 100% right. Let's touch on a little bit on the personal brand and the social media, because you did say you've managed to break down. I think the last time I saw you were on a boat traveling with the hunky new man as well. So
I'll tell him you said that.
this life's not all doom and gloom. You're living the life that you desire.
Yeah, no, it's really tough, and yeah, he's wonderful. I met Paul in mid 2018, and interestingly, we both had separated from our partners at the same time, and we're sort of on the same journey out of that, and all that entails. Both had lots of children, so it was it was really interesting. And he's a wonderful guy. He's very considered, and so that's been really interesting. He's a brake to my accelerator, I think, is probably the right way. And I'll probably once a week go to him and say, I've had the best idea. I don't know if you're like this, Stephen. I can take over the world with this idea. And he sits there and he's so annoying because he goes, what about this, and do. And I say, you've just burst my bubble. I was so excited about that. And I absolutely need that. It's just my personality. But yeah,
I've got that in the podcast host next to you, Nick, there.
I'll just sit here with a pin and burst your bubble, mate. No, I was going to ask you, is he a photographer? Because there was a while there you were on the boat and stuff. Your pictures were amazing. Or did you hire your own personal photographer or something like that? Because
It's him. He's so good. He's got such a good eye. No, he's a wealth manager, so completely different. Yeah, he's been doing that for forever, but he's just got a really good eye. So
Yeah.
he'll, and also I think he put something up on his Instagram once and said what it takes to get one good photo, and he'll take 40 pictures of me, and I'll go no, maybe no. Oh yeah, that's the one. So no, he's really good. He's really slackened off lately, though.
You get him back on the camera.
Yes,
that's that honeymoon period over with, Nicole. You need to get him back on track.
I know. Yeah, and him obviously, because he's really hunky. So I need to get more pictures of him.
So we're chatting about this whole personal brand thing. That's how we can relate to you and have an interview with you and chat as well. How important do you think your personal brand's been through your property development journey, and kind of getting you through this at the moment?
Yeah, it was very important when I was raising funds, absolutely. And it really helped to be one of the first people in this industry that was out there, because it was novel. Now everyone's doing it. So it's sort of expected. And also engagement rates across social media have just plummeted recently. And that's because everyone's doing it and everyone's creating. So no one's got time to consume when they're creating. So that's really interesting. And that's why people are constantly coming up with new ideas and new ways of creating. I think for me now, honestly, I'm a bit bored with it, because I feel like I reached sort of the top of that. And as we were talking about off air, it just takes so much effort to come up with the new posts. And I also found that I was living via my camera, and if I didn't photograph and capture, that didn't happen. And so it's been nice to step back and not capture so much with the camera and just be a little more present in the actual activities. But as far as my journey out of what I say was my dark place in sort of 2019 into 2020, it was interesting, because I felt really judged by everything I put out. And I thought, okay, well, there are people whose lives are not in a good place, and it's insensitive of me to put things out. So I was very selective about what I did put out. And then I got to a point where I thought, why am I worrying about my life when I just need to live my life? It is my life, and my family in Australia, and they want to see that I'm in a good place and that I'm having a good life. So now I guess I've changed I don't know how to say it. I've changed what I will put up. So before I probably was clickbait. I wouldn't think of anything wrong with putting
bikini shots.
Exactly. I was about to say that. I wouldn't see anything wrong with it being October and me putting up a bikini shot, because yes, it would feed my narcissistic side. But now I think that we all have, by the way, but now I think, okay, is it right for me to put up a bikini shot if I want to be treated as a professional in the office where I'm sitting right now? Does it make sense that I do that out of context? When if I'm on the beach with my family, or on the beach on the boat, or whatever it is, that's in context, I'm there. But just have a random picture, to me that doesn't work for me anymore. So it's not, and I am doing it because I will get a whole lot of likes, but I want to be known. I want to be known for what's in here so much more than what I want to be known for here. And I think that's a change over the years with maturity, obviously.
I think it's a lot of that kind of like rings home with me a lot, because I listened to you saying as well that you built up these friends through like networking and social media and all that. And then you said like when times got hard, like they just weren't there. They just disappeared. They didn't want to know, so they weren't actually real friends. They just wanted to know you for being this, like, I mean, you were like, I mean, back when you were right at the start and that, when you were doing all the stuff on Instagram, I mean, you were massive, huge, like 600, 700 likes a post and stuff like that. I mean, it sounds sad to kind of judge you on those kind of, the vanity metrics. But did you think at that time, did you get a bit caught up in the whole thing? Like,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And this is why, and I keep explaining this to my mum, excuse me, about it's so easy to get caught up in all of that and get caught up in your 5 minutes of fame, and it's really easy to get hung up on all of these likes and take these people who want things from you. So opportunities come all the time when you've got a big following. People saying, oh, I've got this great collaboration, I've got this great opportunity. But it's taken Paul, actually. Paul's the one who says, okay, what do they want from you? They want to make money. And what are you getting out of it? What you're wearing their clothes, so you get to wear someone's clothes. You can go out and buy your own clothes. You don't need to put in all this work for them, or you don't need to take their drink it and take all that time to post about it. Why do you need that? And it did make me really think about that. And just to get back, I was talking to my mum about this, about all these conspiracy theorists that are coming out now with COVID and making up all this stuff. And I just said to Mum, don't you think that they're really getting off on the whole dopamine hit that they're getting from having their 5 minutes of fame? That really is what it is, because otherwise no one would even know who Mr. Smith from the funeral parlor in Birmingham is, but now because he's out there saying something controversial, they are. And so we all get hung up on that. And so I am really learning to step back from that and not get it. But it's intoxicating.
It is really, I mean, it's like kind of sad in a way, but like same stuff goes through my head, you know, like I'm and like doing TikTok dances and all the rest of it at the moment, and part of me is thinking, why am I posting this stuff? You know, obviously I enjoy it, it's good fun and that, but part of me is like, when I get the likes in the comments, it gives you a good feeling inside that people are interested, and that is what it is. It's like a drug and you want more of it, but it's quite sad. And like you say, sometimes you just gotta like rein it in. And my wife, who's probably listening to this in the background here, she's very good at doing that as well, make me realize what is actually important in life as well. So
do you think it made you make like possibly bad business decisions as well off the back of it? Because when you were saying that, I was relating to something you were saying quite a lot there. And I remember, I think it was about 2016, 17, it maybe wasn't as much Instagram, I think it was Facebook, but I posted kind of before and after pictures, a lot of property stuff I was doing, and I got caught up in the hype and, you know, everyone blowing smoke up your ass, you know, phenomenal job, what a transformation, beautiful house, you know, hundreds of comments, hundreds of likes and shit like that. And then you kind of get caught up in your own hype that I took the eye off the ball on what I was buying. Now, it wasn't the same level of stuff you were doing, but I was, you know, maybe flipping 5 or 6 properties on the go at one time. And then I would start getting more creative for the stuff I was buying that wasn't really selling that well. And I'd be stuck on bridging loans that would then double, you know, in interest rates after the 6 month or the 9 month point, because I was so caught up in my own hype. I think I took the eye off the ball for probably about a year. And it almost, you know, I did go flipping quite tits up for quite a while as well. Do you think you made that forced you to do it?
Absolutely. It is intoxicating, and you really get off on that. And there's a reason why when I've talked to ex-pro football and rugby players, for example, they say that excuse me, the reason that so many former sports people go into property is because apart from sex, drugs, and gambling, nothing else gives you this high, or maybe trading cryptocurrency as well now, but nothing else gives you, which I'd count as gambling, but anyway, nothing else gives you the highs and then the lows as well as property. You think about it and you think about what you go through and those emotions that you go through during that process. And yeah, it really does impact your ability to make those the right decisions. I will absolutely say that, and I don't think my lawyer would jump down my throat if he heard that. But I think that's why it's so important to have someone that's there. So for me now, it's having Henry and my lawyer and having Paul, who were there saying, right, we need to put a brake on you, because while you're like you, Stephen, you come up with these great ideas and you're creative and you can do what you do, you don't have a no or an off switch. You just are on, and you need this. And it's it's part of our addictive personality, I think, whereas Nick seems like you're much more controlled, and you've got your wife who's clearly got her head on very firmly. And so yeah.
I think my wife's given up with me. I think that's the problem.
Yeah, well, that happens. Yeah. I think my ex probably, he did give up on me.
The only thing that's happened to me. It's like, just get on with it. As long as the house doesn't get taken off us, I don't care.
So do you want to talk about what you're up to now then, Nicole? Because you've got some exciting stuff going on, and it's good to see you kind of like, you know, you've been through a difficult time, but it's good to see you. I mean, on the face of it, you look like happier and stuff. You've got a few things happening. Yeah. What's going on?
Yeah, I am happier, and I think it's that contentment. And I would say that people say I just want to be happy, and for me it's not. I just want to be content, because I think they're two different things. And there's that sense of peace that you get with contentment that you might not get with happiness. But anyway, that's splitting hairs. So what really got me through was in October 2020, I worked with a fantastic, or sorry, earlier than that, May 2020, I worked with a fantastic coach, Nikki Trott. And she just approached me and said, you really look like you need this. I'm not going to charge you, but let me work with you. And she was wonderful. And she helped me realize that I needed a small win to get my self-esteem back up and get my confidence levels back up. And I thought that was a property. I thought I needed to find a new project to flip, just a quick flat in Kent where I now live. And she got me thinking that maybe it was just something else. And she said, what do you really enjoy doing? And I said, I love my podcast. And it's been going since 2017. It seems to be going well. And she said, okay, why don't we focus on that? So I relaunched that in September 2020. And it really was the one thing that I could do each week that would sort of ground me. And when I was losing my head and everything else was going on around me, I had my podcast every week that would come out, and it was twice a week, and then we put it down to once a week, and now it's didn't come out this week. But anyway, that's how it happened.
You can use this one. You can use this.
Oh yes, there you go. Excellent. Can we put it out now today?
Yeah, we'll just send you the recording.
Great, excellent. There you go. But it was just this small win. So I've been working on that, and I think my podcast and its format has traveled its journey. And so I wanted to be a lot more clear about the intention of the podcast. So I'm relaunching next year under a new name called the Prosperity Podcast. And what I like about prosperity is that it means that you're thriving and flourishing, and not just in wealth, but also in your health and your well-being. And I really love that word. It means doing well, if you look at the Latin form. And so for me, I want to look at some of the people of advanced years, mature people especially, and look at the stories that they can bring. Because I've found that when you're in your 20s and 30s, you think you know it all, and then you hit 40 and all of a sudden go, oh my goodness, I know nothing. I'm still learning. And so it's interesting that older people say that once they're in their 80s and 90s, they have so much wisdom they could give to the young people, but they're not heard. So I want to talk to all people of all ages, really, but mainly older people, and just delve into the stories that really shaped them in their life with this background of money. So when they first discovered how wealthy they were or not, what class they might have been in, how they grew up, what their parents' attitudes to money are, what their attitudes. So it's really interesting. I've recorded the first few of those. I've got some celebrities coming on, which one might be a top cricketer, one's a top wine writer. I've got some others in there.
I love that that concept, and I think growing up and being a teenager and being quite influenced by people like that, if you got to speak to someone that you had been through a little bit, or been, I love speaking to my gran. I love hearing my gran
exactly.
stories. Like shipped up from London to Glasgow, and during World War II and stuff like that. I just love hearing stories of people who have been through the mills and stuff. Like, I think that's so cool, because like you say, no one in our generation where they don't share it on social media, so no one gets to hear them. And I think when you get the chance to have a conversation with people like that, it is really enlightening, isn't it?
Exactly. And I'd love to speak to Lanan if you want to, because the idea is to get our grandparents. And the reason that this came about is both Paul and I lost our only surviving grandparents, and they both just happened to be our maternal grandfathers last year. And so we just wished that we had immortalized them in this way. So again, I'm speaking to a lady I met on Instagram, her mother-in-law, who's 93. I'm speaking to her. And she was, of course, up in the north of England during the war. I'm speaking to another man who's in his 70s who was in Germany during the war and went to what was then Palestine, that later became Israel. So there's all these really interesting people with great stories to tell, and so I'm just really looking forward to interviewing them and
that's
and
cool. I
sharing
mean,
those.
remember people love just listening to old people as well, because like Stephen said there, I remember the guy who was doing the laps around his garden during the lockdown.
Yes, yeah.
I think unfortunately he died recently, but
Yeah.
he became like he became a superstar overnight. Remember,
Exactly.
Captain Tom or something like that. I can't remember.
Tom Morgan, was it? Captain Tom?
Aye, that's
How
right.
can we forget?
So getting people like that would be amazing,
Yeah.
inspirational. Absolutely. No, that's really good to
Yeah.
hear.
So we're launching on the 24th of January, and I'm just really excited. I think this is the right next evolution for the podcast. So I hope I can make it bigger and better.
I think that'd be phenomenal. I'm kind of trying to rack my brain there as you were explaining that, thinking who would I love to hear a story? Because, like you say, there is people that older generation that you would love to kind of get on and ask questions.
Yeah. It's people like your nan who've got great stories. Who I've got, just to show you the range of people I'm speaking next week to a European karate champion about sport and money in sport and just what sports taught him about life. So it's he's in his 20s, I think, maybe 30s, but 20s. So it's a real range of people, but
yeah,
I'm keeping it open because I want to speak to some younger people as well, but mainly it is about hearing the stories of older people.
That's something I'll be listening to that one, because I'm obsessed with martial arts since I was 4 years old. Competing at world-class level.
Okay.
17, and then going, and it was kind of interesting when you were talking on that as well about the kind of the rush. I think you were actually describing my personality, of the rush of the kind of the sports competitor, the martial arts competitor that tries to find that buzz through the next thing or the next thing, and if it's property or whatever. So yeah, that'd be a phenomenal podcast. Can't wait to listen to, actually.
And when can we expect your property comeback then, Nicole?
Oh, I don't know. At the moment, I'm sitting in Paul's offices at 77 Wealth Management, helping with their marketing communications. So that's what I'm doing as my day job, because I found I needed to. I was sitting at home and just trying to work on all this property, and there was nothing positive coming out of it. It was just more work. And so Paul went, right, you're coming to work with me in marketing. And I went, okay.
Do you not miss the create, like when you started right at the beginning and you were doing up these kind of fixer uppers and that, and you were doing your own touches and the design and all that and the staging? Do you miss that side of things? Or
I do, yeah. Someone contacted me yesterday and said, I've got a new project for you, and I just went,
aye.
Anyway,
this is definitely
watch this space.
This is definitely not the end of Nicole Bremner when it comes to property. I'm pretty sure of it.
Yeah, we'll see. Depends if you're talking to Henry, who says it's not the end, or Paul, who says that's the end. So we'll see.
I'm sure no matter what you do, you're going to put your flair and passion into making it the best it can be. We look forward to continue to see your journey.
Thank you so much. It's been a great discussion.
Thanks, Nicole. I found it really open and honest. So thanks very much. I feel thanks for opening up about your hard times as well, because we just see the shiny lifestyle a lot of times on people's social media. So you said you don't want to be negative, but I think it's important. I think you've kind of earned the right to be negative because you've been at that level. So people need to realize it's not all plain sailing.
Certainly isn't. No, that's for sure.
Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
So thanks very much for listening to us again. Hope you got some real good value from that. I think there's loads of lessons to be learnt there. In terms of private investing funding, JV partnerships. It's not all rosy, guys, so make sure you do your due diligence, you get those contracts set up and those agreements so that everybody knows what role they're playing. Yeah, absolutely. And she shares that completely open and honest, which is really good. And follow Nicole on Instagram and check out our podcast as well. And we're quite excited to listen to our new podcast, which is launched in January as well. Absolutely. As always, guys, share our podcast on your social media. Tag myself and Stephen and the Scottish Property Podcast on Instagram, and we'll send it out to our followers as well. Book on our events. We do them the first Wednesday of every month. The Glasgow December event is sold out. I think we've still got some tickets for the other one, Stephen. We still have tickets for Aberdeen, Dundee and Edinburgh, but not that many left. So yeah, I look forward to seeing you guys at the event. I'll be up in Aberdeen on the 1st of December. Thanks for listening and see you soon.